Only after losing everything can we be truly free. A person who owns nothing learns to suppress their desires. Diogenes was born in 404 BC in Sinope. In his youth, before he was interested in philosophy, he was accused of counterfeiting money and was exiled to Athens. As the son of a wealthy father, his real adventure began with this exile. In Athens, he met Antisthenes, the founder of Cynic philosophy. Antisthenes, a student of Socrates, advocated virtue as the sole value in the tranquility and peace it would bring. According to him, such a peaceful life and inner tranquility depended on a person being self-sufficient. But how can one be self-sufficient? According to Antisthenes, people could possess this value by being indifferent to the basic needs of life, and especially by avoiding pleasure. Of course, being indifferent did not mean completely detaching from these needs. Naturally, a person should at least meet their basic needs, but without indulging in worldly possessions to the extent that it jeopardizes their virtuous life. Antisthenes, who tried to live his philosophy quietly, did not accept students. However, Diogenes persisted in becoming his student. On one occasion, when his teacher threatened him with a stick, he offered his head and said, "Go ahead, strike. As long as I think I have something, no stick will be strong enough to keep me away from you." This simple sentence actually shows the commitment to Cynic philosophy. In Cynic philosophy, there is no yielding to pain, neither physically nor spiritually. Whether it is a stick or the harsh conditions of nature causing pain, the Cynic does not care. They do not feel the pain. This is how Diogenes became acquainted with Cynic philosophy. He fell from wealth into poverty, becoming in need of a morsel of bread. To understand why he chose such a life, we need to look at what Cynic philosophy is. Cynicism derives from the Greek word cynic, which is an adjective form of the word for dog. Kynikos means having the attitude of a dog or possessing characteristics related to dogs. The focal point of this philosophy is the concept of ethics. For those who adopt cynicism, the unique meaning and purpose of life is virtue. Cynics evaluate the achievement of absolute independence by a virtuous person as keeping oneself away from all kinds of expectations, desires, and attachments. Antisthenes believed that this was best realized in the personality of Socrates. He stated that the ultimate goal of a person is not just to live, but to live well. According to him, the purpose of being moral is not to adhere to some abstract ethical rules, but to attain happiness. In other words, being moral was not an end in itself, but a means to achieve happiness. For this reason, Antisthenes and his followers are considered Socratic because the foundation of this philosophy was to possess the virtue of self-sufficiency and achieve happiness. Cynic philosophy emphasizes physical and moral endurance more than traditional virtues such as justice and courage. Therefore, Cynics reflected their thoughts by applying them in their own lives rather than writing them down. This is because Cynic philosophy is based on principles that require application and are oriented towards daily life. Diogenes best exemplified this way of life. Taking cynicism to the extreme and exceeding his teacher's teachings, the philosopher lived like a beggar. He respected no custom or rule of courtesy and attacked all values of civilization. The Cynics opposed the hedonism of another Socratic school, the Cyrenaics, and focused on an ascetic lifestyle, or austerity. Asceticism, a mystical practice encountered throughout the history of philosophy and religions, involves simplifying one's living conditions and minimizing needs. This way, an individual strengthens their soul and frees it from the tyranny of the body. The Cynics viewed this ascetic life as a method of discipline to resist all forms of pleasure, external influences, and societal values. Diogenes' life in exile exemplified such an austere existence. Although he sometimes felt sorrowful about his situation, he found ways to motivate himself. For example, while the Athenians were holding a festival and feasting all night, Diogenes was attempting to sleep in a corner of the marketplace. Feeling completely alone and deprived of all comforts, a mouse approached and began nibbling on the crumbs of his bread. Diogenes realized that if the mouse could lead a satisfactory life with mere crumbs, it was wrong for him to complain about his own condition. Being poor and without friends and not invited to anyone's home, Diogenes drew lessons from the mouse's life. The mouse, running here and there, unafraid of the dark and uninterested in anything, showed him how to overcome difficulties. Diogenes was a person whose freedom could not be taken away by anyone because he had nothing to lose. Having made an empty barrel his home, Diogenes knew that everything given to a person is eventually reclaimed. To others, he appeared to live in squalor. However, this allowed him to live safely among thieves and robbers, a lifestyle reminiscent of kings. Furthermore, the happiness he derived from this life was akin to the happiness of the gods. Having nothing brings the joy of having nothing to lose. Indeed, when Diogenes' slave escaped, he declared that he was finally free. This freedom was due to not having to lose his slave again. Diogenes defined people he considered slaves as those who were morally flawed. Excessive focus on the body, love, and marriage-based relationships, sexual deviations, and valuing wealth were among the human flaws. According to Diogenes, those who surrender to their stomachs, sexual desires, and sleep experience threefold slavery. He himself indulged in sexual pleasures, but this was only to alleviate the bodily discomfort caused by the lack of sexual intercourse. For Diogenes, self-gratification in deceiving pleasure was easier than attempting to control sexual desire. Therefore, he avoided women. This avoidance also implied refraining from societal-approved relationships and family life. Indeed, Diogenes scorned and rejected the relationships men of his society had with women. He viewed a man's proposal to a woman as an unremarkable act that causes many troubles. In a letter attributed to him, Diogenes argued that people should neither marry nor have children, linking this to the weakness of human nature and the fact that children burden people with additional troubles. He suggested that those who marry and raise children out of desire would eventually regret it. According to him, anyone content with what they have, living a life of self-sufficiency and simplicity, would reject marriage and childbearing. Diogenes also viewed those who valued wealth as slaves. Such people move in the opposite direction from the path to happiness. Therefore, abandoning great wealth, a home, a bank, and a luxurious lifestyle to beg for bread every day is the way to achieve happiness. Disdaining wealth along with fame and pleasure makes a person noble. After all, wealth is merely the refuse of fortune. Furthermore, a life spent accumulating wealth is considered wasted, as a wealthy person leaves behind money they cannot use. Those who inherit large fortunes are, according to Diogenes, merely large-scale beggars. Consequently, the desire for money is the root of all evils. Therefore, Diogenes would say that someone who pretended to be in love with an old rich woman had no interest in the woman herself, but merely sought to exploit her. The greatest example of how to live a good life is nature. For the cynics, virtue is living in accordance with nature. Just like animals, especially dogs, social norms and traditions impose constraints that force people to live without freedom, thereby adopting behavioral rules contrary to nature. As a result, these constraints prevent them from living well and freely. Traditions are not inherently bad. However, for the cynics, traditions are often seen as absurd and worthy of ridicule. Therefore, a person can be truly free only if they escape the restrictions that hinder their moral life. Diogenes was so free and indifferent that his reputation spread far and wide, capturing the curiosity of emperors. When Alexander the Great, king of Macedon, learned of Diogenes and his way of living, he visited him in the open space where Diogenes was basking in the sun. Alexander asked if there was anything Diogenes wanted, promising to fulfill any request immediately. Diogenes, who had conquered half of the known world in just 13 years, replied, "Don't block my sunlight. I don't want anything else." Diogenes' barrel has become an important symbol in literature and philosophy and has turned into an image of classical cynicism. The event that led Diogenes to live in a barrel was his observation of snails. After noticing that snails carry their homes on their backs, Diogenes decided to live in a barrel. However, it seems Diogenes must have grown tired of this life as well, as he ended his life by suicide. A few centuries after Diogenes, another philosopher summarized his philosophy as follows: "First, I will strip you of all luxuries and make you experience poverty. I will dress you in tattered rags and make you work like a laborer until you collapse from exhaustion. You will sleep on the ground, drink only water, and eat whatever you find. If you come across money, I will tell you to throw it into the sea. You will stop thinking about your wife, children, and country. All these things will start to seem like absurdities to you. You will leave your family and begin living in a cemetery, a tower, or inside a barrel. With such a life, believe me, you will be happier than a Persian king. Even if they tie you to a torture rack, you will not care. You must be stubborn and determined. You should act indifferently toward anyone who comes before you, whether they are a king or an ordinary person. Speak your mind freely so that you earn everyone's admiration. In your speeches, be blunt, even growl like a dog, scowl, and have a facial expression and walk that match. In other words, everything about you should be wild and animalistic. You should cast aside all modesty and courtesy. Choose the busiest places and go there to stay alone. Do not speak to anyone, and do not allow anyone to approach you. Do very courageous things in front of everyone that many people would not dare to do in their own lives. If you want, eat a raw octopus or squid and die. This is the happiness we can promise you.